Hashtag Story 1. The Skeleton's Revenge. In the ancient county of Changshan, there lived a man named Li San. He was a hunter by trade, rough and uneducated, a man who had never once considered the consequences of his actions. One autumn afternoon, as Li San walked through the western hills with his bow and arrows, he came upon a shallow grave half exposed by recent rains. The earth had washed away, and lying partially uncovered was a human skeleton, bleached white by the sun, its empty eye sockets gazing at the sky. It was the remains of some poor soul, buried long ago in an unmarked grave, forgotten by the world. Li San paused. He stared at the skeleton for a long moment, and then, instead of covering it with earth as any decent man would, he picked up the skull and laughed. "What a fine drinking cup this would make," he said aloud, and carried the skull home. That evening, Li San sat at his table with a jar of cheap wine. He had cleaned the skull, scrubbed it until it gleamed, and now he filled it with wine and drank from it. Back and forth he went, filling the skull and emptying it, laughing at his own dark humor. "What do you think, old friend?" he slurred, holding the skull up to the candlelight. "Is the wine to your liking?" The skull said nothing. It could not speak. But something was watching. Li San finished the jar and collapsed onto his bed, drunk and snoring. In the dead of night, when the moon was hidden behind clouds and the household was silent, the skull began to move. It rolled from the table and landed with a soft thud on the earthen floor. Then it began to spin, slowly at first, then faster and faster, rattling across the room like a demonic top. It stopped at Li San's bedside. From the empty eye sockets, 2 points of green light flickered to life, the cold fire of a vengeful spirit. Li San's wife, sleeping beside him, felt a sudden chill. She opened her eyes and saw the skull staring at her husband. She tried to scream, but her voice caught in her throat. The skull spoke. "Li San," it said, in a voice like dry leaves scraping stone. "You stole my head to drink your wine. Now I shall take yours." The voice woke Li San. He sat up with a start, and when he saw the skull before him, glowing with spectral light, his blood turned to ice. He tried to leap from the bed, but his legs would not move. The skull flew at him, its jaw snapping open and shut like a trap. Li San shrieked and fell backward, his head striking the wall with a sickening crack. His wife screamed and grabbed for him, but it was too late. Blood trickled from his ears and nose. His eyes went wide and empty. The skull clattered to the floor. The green lights faded. It was just a skull again, a piece of bleached bone. But Li San never moved again. The magistrate ruled it a tragic accident. A drunken man fell and struck his head, but Li San's wife knew better. She buried the skull with full funerary rites, burning spirit money and offering prayers for the restless soul. From that day on, no one in Changshan County dared disturb the dead, for the dead, they say, do not forget, and they do not forgive. Hashtag Story 2. The scholar who met a fox scholar Du was a man of modest talents. He had studied the classics since childhood, memorized the 4 books and 5 classics, but when it came to the imperial examinations, he always fell short. Year after year, he traveled to the provincial capital, and year after year, he returned home empty-handed, his purse lighter and his hopes dimmer. After his 5th failure, Du was too ashamed to return to his village. Instead, he rented a small room in a temple outside the city where he could study in solitude. The temple was old and quiet, nestled among pine trees on a hillside. The only sound was the wind in the branches and the distant chime of a bronze bell. Every night, Du read by candlelight until his eyes burned. He recited the Confucian texts aloud, pacing back and forth across the worn stone floor. And every night, the loneliness pressed in on him like a physical weight. One night, as autumn rain pattered against the window, there came a knock at his door. Du opened it to find a young woman standing in the rain, her clothes soaked, her hair plastered to her face. She shivered and looked up at him with large, dark eyes. "Please, sir," she said softly, "I have lost my way in the storm. May I shelter here for a while?" Du hesitated. It was improper for an unmarried man to host a woman alone. But the rain was heavy, and her shivering touched his heart. "Come in, quickly," he said, stepping aside. The woman introduced herself as Miss Yuni Husait, she said with a shy smile. She was traveling to visit relatives when she became lost in the storm. Du gave her a dry robe and made her tea. They sat by the candle and talked until dawn. Yun was intelligent and well-read. She quoted poetry with ease and laughed at Du's jokes, not politely, but genuinely. For the first time in years, Du felt truly happy. She stayed. One night became 2, then a week, then a month. Du's studying suffered, but he did not care. He had found something more precious than the imperial examinations: companionship, understanding, love. But the head monk of the temple noticed. One afternoon, the old monk took Du aside. "There is something strange about that girl," he said gravely. "I have seen her walking in the forest at midnight, and I have seen fox tracks around your door. She is not what she seems." Du laughed it off. "Father," he said, "you see demons everywhere. She is just a woman." But that night, as Du lay half asleep, he heard a strange rustling sound. He opened his eyes a crack. Yun was sitting by the window, her back to him, but she was not looking out at the moon. She was holding up her hand, and it was no longer a hand. It was a paw, covered in russet fur, with sharp black claws. Du's heart stopped. Then it raced. He squeezed his eyes shut and forced himself to breathe slowly, pretending to sleep. The next morning he confronted her. "Yun," he said quietly, "are you a fox spirit?" She looked at him for a long time. Then she smiled, a sad, resigned smile. "Yes," she said, "I am. I have cultivated for 300 years. I have the power to take human form. But I fell in love with you, Scholar Du, and I forgot my purpose." Du's hands trembled. All the stories he had heard about fox spirits, that they drained men's life force, that they were servants of darkness, flooded his mind. But when he looked at Yun, he saw only the woman who had kept him company through lonely nights, who had made him laugh, who had loved him. "Will you hurt me?" he asked. "Never," she said. "But I cannot stay. The monk knows what I am, and if he does not drive me out with his prayers, my presence will shorten your life. I draw upon your vitality, even without meaning to." Yun stood and walked to the door. She turned back one last time. "I will remember you, Scholar Du. For all my 300 years, I will remember you." And she stepped outside, transforming as she did. A russet fox with a white-tipped tail glanced back at him once, then vanished into the forest. Du lived to a ripe old age. He never passed the imperial examinations. He never married. But on quiet nights, when the moon was full and the wind carried the scent of pine, he would sit by his window and watch the tree line, waiting for a flash of russet